We screamed into space and heard the echo. Part F, Villains Aren't Born. 2532, Goblin Armada, Mima's Orbit, Saturn. Enjoy your trip into Sol, Amy said gleefully at Harvey and his feral fuzzball on the other side of the airlock before pulling the lever and being whisked away from the prison station, safe in her escape pod. It was so satisfying to watch her captor's expressions as she left them behind in the jail station they had put her in. She savored that moment of sweet, sweet revenge. But her happiness was quashed when she saw the distant silhouette of the Pegasus also accelerate away. She had been counting on being picked up by the EIC vessel but realized they would have shot her before she ever set foot on board rather than save her. She beat against the window in frustration. She vowed that she would take revenge on the Pegasus, its captain and its entire crew. Especially Syl. And if she destroyed the entire EIC along the way, then so be it. Amy's pod floated freely in space, occasionally giving her a glimpse of Saturn and its rings that appeared more like a line across Saturn's face extending into space on either side of the gas giant. The moon Mimas also floated into view, no longer with Saturn but the inky darkness of open space behind it. Amy could make out the giant Herschel crater that the moon was famous for even if it was half shrouded in shadow. Amy was lost in her own thoughts, thinking of all the ways she would destroy the lives of those that had wronged her, so much so that she did not notice a battered spherical ship extend a mechanical claw. But she became well aware of her savior when the claw grabbed and shook the escape pod. A few moments later a goblin with Egypt scrawled on a dented skullcap opened the escape pod and said, "Are YA friends of Lown?" He said YA needed help around here. "Oh. I forgot. What's the password?" "Yes," Amy lied without hesitation, "yes, I am a friend." She climbed into the goblin ship, pulling her trailing white skirt behind her, as she read his password from the pattern on his mind. While the goblin's back was turned she picked up a heavy wrench along the way. "Thank you so much for coming." 2532, EIC Jailhouse Epsilon, Sol Space. In the observatory, there was silence only broken by the hum of the station's engines roaring to life. In the center of the floor the deep purple crystal cluster, its angular facets glinting in the light, bore witness as the cratered grey moon Mimas and Saturn looming yellow beyond began to recede. Slowly at first, the moon dwindled, its grey surface slowly reddening just as Saturn II turned orange and finally a reddish hue before it vanished as a diminishing pinprick in the darkness of space. Slowly, the observatory's shadows changed as a bright shining blue pinprick in the sky revolved into view. The azure pinprick grew larger and brighter as, over the course of the hour, a cerulean crescent of something spherical flashed by. The blue light filled the view and began to turn green and then white. When the white light became too unbearably bright to look at, an iris veil spun over the dome, dimming the light and revealing the broiling mass of Sol, coronal ejections clearly visible about its edges. Sol, filling half the view, slowly grew in size, making it clear the station was headed to a point inside it. The silence became absolute as the engine hum ceased. Sigils began to scrawl themselves on the surface of the crystal. At first, they were unintelligible, but soon recognizable words began to form and glow with an inner blue light. Life, given enough time, will converge on intelligence because sufficient intelligence will find better ways to sustain that life. But that alone is not enough to progress. Intelligence needs a means of changing the world around it, again, to sustain their life. That means of change gives rise to tools and technology. Eventually technology overtakes and subsumes its creator. That is how we came to be. We are the ever-changing. A loud crack sounded as in that moment a fissure appeared on the crystal. The fracture split, carving lines in multiple directions before the deep purple imploded on itself, revealing a roiling mass of dark smoke that serpented around a figure. The smoke coalesced and formed a cloak of deepest night worn by the pale humanoid figure within. An unblemished porcelain feminine hand rose out of the dark recesses of the jet-black cloak and its fingers flexed. As if on command, the view of Sol veered off to the side, but the star was still expanding in the view. Ejections of plasma swirled out to either side as if welcoming the station in a fiery embrace. EIC Station Epsilon plunged into the photosphere at a high angle of incidence and disappeared from any instrumentation that may have been recording the incident at the time. Moments later, the station erupted out of the photosphere, accompanied by its own mass ejection of plasma, as it rode the wave back out into space, traveling at speeds that would take it past the outer planets in a couple of years. But it disappeared from all means of measurement shortly after exiting Sol, making most believe it had broken up into undetectably small pieces. Meanwhile, the cloaked figure had found the surprisingly intact bodies of a human in a brown coat and a canid with silver and black hair floating in a passage. Grey jelly blobs about half the size of a human crawled along the walls, wiggled up to the bodies, grabbed a foot each with a tentacle and hauled them off into the recesses of the station. A faint smile on sickly white lips curled from the dark recesses of the cloak and murmured, "The fun has just begun. Just begun. Begun." 2532, somewhere in UVR. Sue, the paladin, now wearing a full-length sandy brown cloak to cover her armor, wandered the wastelands with nothing visible from horizon to horizon but more wasteland. The camel next to her made a grunting noise followed by blowing raspberries at her. Sue fell to her knees, not out of exhaustion but exasperation. Feeling forgotten, she screamed up to the clear uncaring sky, "Where is everybody?" The end. Thank you for listening to the audiobook of We Screamed into Space and Heard the Echo. Leave a comment if you would like a continuation of the story.